You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Maxim Ioffe, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Maxim, and welcome to The Only Constant. Thank you for joining me today for this episode of The Only Constant, which will be the 22nd episode, I think.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for having me. Great podcast. Very excited to be here.
Likewise, really excited to have you on the show today. So you have an automation background. You've been working in automation for a long time, right?
Yeah, I've spent a couple of years doing this. Started in around 2018, but what I've been doing prior to that was as close to automation as it gets. I've been spending a lot of years in supply chain optimization, more specifically inventory optimization, and it all boils down to how do we make things happen? And there is no way to make it happen manually when you're working for a large supply chain organization. At the time, it was a Fortune 400 company. We're now Fortune 200, so with scale comes the need for automation.
Nice. So let's just jump into it, right? So everyone in the world has been hit by the AI craze, but someone like us who both come from an automation background, it both seems like a contradiction of all the limitations we've spent years teaching people that automation technology, can't do, right? All the things it can't do about, it can't work with unstructured data, it can't talk, it can't chat, it can't see things. Um, and that's a little bit annoying, I think, sometimes that we have to sort of backtrack on some of the messaging we've been putting out there for years. But also, it seems like it's also the real deal automation solution we've actually been waiting for. So, how has it been a blessing for you in your work, and how has it been a distraction and a nuisance?
That's a great framework to think about it. It is a blessing from a standpoint that plenty of people all of the sudden become automation experts or become very much interested in automation. When something goes mainstream, you naturally get this progression of, hey, I want to play with it. And Gen AI being as accessible as it is created that amount of hype. Fortunately enough, in our organization, we've been educating employees about automation for quite a while. That's one of the big things that my Center of Excellence does is just focusing on education, and that really helps us. And that really creates the blessing from a standpoint that all of a sudden the pipeline becomes bigger and the amount of things that we can do becomes wider. There's no question on that. On the flip side of that, as I said, everybody becomes an expert. So a lot of times the expectations are unrealistic. The hype cycle is definitely impacting folks making assumptions that AI can do things that it just can't, whether it's working without any data. Can AI do that for me? Can you do it manually? No. Do we have the data to do it? No. Cannot AI figure it out? Well, maybe, but probably not. And that's where it becomes a little bit more of an education, a little bit more of the conversation. Um, we are able to turn that into a blessing still from a standpoint that we start the conversations of, okay, we cannot do this, but can we do something else? What can we do to turn this craze and hype into achievable steps? Maybe phase one of this is small, but it gives us what we start us on the road toward the end goal. And that's how we, again, try to make it as much of it as a blessing as we possibly can.
Hmm. So you're saying there's a lot of unrealistic expectations. So we also had that with our PA, right? There was a 2014, I think, a
Mhm.
Gartner article where the next boss might be a bot, and they meant an RPA bot, right? So you, you have some. We've seen this before. So is your messaging really changed, or is it sort of the same as you used to do?
I mean, not nothing is constant in that regard. We always update the message, and we always try to figure out what's the best way to do it. But I think you're right. It's the hype cycle is called hype cycle for a reason. Before it was RPA, before it was something else. Some of the listeners might remember what was before RPA. All of the sudden,
Mm.
object-oriented programming or whatever technical languages or whatever it is. We've been always on a quest for that better, and I think the key here is just to stay realistic about it. And I don't know if we're going to touch on that, but a lot of unrealistic expectation translate into failure to start the program or scale the program. And
Mm.
this is where, by updating the messaging and keeping it in tune to what we can actually deliver, maybe underselling even a little bit, we are able to move the field forward a lot faster compared to, oh yeah, you can do everything. And
So
no,
this
you
is
can't.
interesting. You're an automation leader at a big company, a Fortune 200 company, as you said, right? And you work in hype tech and automation, and you have to downplay the technology every time you get into discussions, right?
Well, I don't know how much of an industry turn it is, but I'm trying to break the pipeline into realistic pipeline and visual pipeline, and I'm measuring myself on a realistic implementable pipeline. Those are the
Mm.
things that will keep the lights going for our COE. Those are the things that will help our employees to move forward. I need that. Those visions, those inspirations, they're great. I mean, it's hard to work without the vision, without the North Star, without the goal. And it's great when employees get excited, but at the same time, we got to keep it realistic and deliver. Otherwise, that excitement quickly turns into the disappointment.
Yeah, yeah, you've seen messages also like AI is the last invention we'll ever have, and you're like, but what do
Sure.
you mean? What do you mean? Define AI, please. Or
Exactly. Define AI, define the applicability. And one of the things that really strikes me is that if you think about the businesses, we're a supply chain company at the heart. We provide solutions, we help our customers to build, power, connect, and protect the world. There's no word AI in any of that. It could be a component of it, it could be an enabler of it, it could open new possibilities, it could make something that we could never do before doable. But fundamentally, the mission of the company hasn't changed and shouldn't change. If you go to a grocery store, again, the AI component of that is not going to be that important for you. You want to make sure that they have the milk and the bread and they sell it at the competitive price. That's what we measure now. It's not how, it's really what we're looking for.
yeah, and that's also that seems to be well, you always as an influencer, you're always looking at and a leader in the space, right? You must also experience this that um, we constantly worry that we might say that this is not going to be the technology that it might end up becoming. So there's always these messages that it's going to be everywhere, and we've seen robots chatting and sorting dishes for dishwashers and everything.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I always feel a little bit encumbered by reality almost when I just want to have my sci-fi dreams because it's like there's no real the disruption is not there, right? We've been promised that with the productivity tools and everything, and ChatGPT and Microsoft been saying it, and everyone's been saying it, right? But there's no, but it's not there. We don't see it. As you said, you're right. You were still we're still a supply chain company. We're not an AI company yet, right? Uh, it becomes a
I don't
utility.
really.
It becomes a microservice, right? Something you just integrate into other
Mhm.
things, doesn't it?
Right, and disruption comes in different forms and shapes. Will we throw out everything old and start fresh with something new? That rare. That I cannot think of any example where it really happened. And I think a lot of times the vision that we have, nobody wants to be stuck in traffic. Get stuck in traffic and you start thinking about self-driving cars and how awesome it would be not to pay attention to the road. But then you remember headlines from 10, 15 years ago that the trucker is a dead specialty. Nobody needs truckers anymore. Self-driving trucks will do it.
Mm.
That never happened. There is probably no appetite for it, even in private vehicles. And that's something I just covered for my citizen developers trainings and conversation. We talked about this I asked a simple question: how much do you want to pay for the technology? All the radars, all the lidars, all the data technology, all the links, everything else. Say that's $50,000 to the cost of the car. Are you still interested in buying that vehicle?
Mm.
Not too many people are. And this is where, yes, there is a technology, but there is also how feasible it is, how realistic it is. And in case of cars, the disruption might be just the amount of tech enabled features that we have that make the roads safer. The emergency braking, the cross traffic alerts, the line departure warnings, the blinking lights in the mirror when you're trying to shift the lines. All that is a disruptor in a way, right? But it's not that revolution where the driver gets out of the car for good.
No, but that's where we keep on hearing that it's coming now, and Elon Musk and Tesla, But
Yeah.
you're shaking your head. I can see here, so it's a little bit like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's keep on being. We've heard this before, haven't we, Maxim? That's why you're shaking your head a little bit.
It might come. I mean, it might come. It probably will come. But at the same time, we know that Ford divested out of Argo. We know that Apple closed their program.
Mm.
We know that GM program is not highly profitable. Will it come? It probably will. But it's the evolution. It's very rare that technology creates that instant impact on something that is really a staple of civilization.
Yeah, but that's not okay. So let's go disruption, right? So there's a thing here, right? I just thought of right while we talked that it seems like AI is becoming a commoditized utility that everyone can sort of embed into everything they do to some extent, and commoditized quickly. That's important, and it's not something that's out of reach for anyone because we could use these foundational models. Everyone can use those. Uh, it seems that disruption is about technology, but it's also a lot about different places, right? Like going into Netflix, going into I th- and there's no really no different place you can put your customers into here because everyone can just add this. Or how do you see that? Where should we look for disruption? Just let's have that chat. I know you don't have an answer for that, but if we wanted it, how would it look?
I definitely don't have an answer for that. And if I did, I would be playing stock market, not talking here. But it's hard. It's hard to tell where it's going, right? But at the same time, there are some trends that we already seen. One of them is personal productivity tools.
Mm.
I think the Copilot and ability to search and ability to summarize data, all those different things are there, and they are definitely having an impact, and that should probably continue.
But that's not
We
disruption.
also
That's not disrupting any enterprise because everyone can have it for $30.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not a firm believer in major disruption coming all at once. Forget about everything we did yesterday. We're going to start from a
Hmm.
clean slate today, or we're going to see a bunch of new companies. But there are pockets of that, right? Intelligent document processing is a great example for that. We are used to reading the invoices and other documents in a certain way, and all of a sudden, AI powered tools come in, and they made tremendous change. Think about document translations. Initially, the translated text was pretty maybe usable, maybe not, probably more on the not usable side.
Mm.
All of a sudden, with AI and everything else, it becomes extremely usable, right? The whole mission of the translation is there. Think about image generation. Again, is it a disruption for the entire civilization? Absolutely not, but it's disruption for the industries that we just touched, disruption for professions that were there. Will the art of translation be a dying art? Probably not, but will translator be able to leverage that tool to become infinitely more productive and infinitely better? Probably will.
It's funny, right, that you say that because everyone's always looking at automation as a thing to save money, right? But in the end, it seems to always just increase uh, the demand for more complex solutions, and then we end up doing more and hiring more people. Isn't that true?
It's very true, and again, I think throughout the years, as probably as close to the disruption we had as the internet, and did it kill some jobs? Absolutely, but how many did it create? Probably ten
Yeah,
times more than it killed.
yeah.
The whole concept of global economy would not be available to us without this instant communications. And guess what? It happened, and more people got jobs versus people who lose jobs, and a lot of jobs get transformed. I don't even think about it in terms of so much of hey, we're going to lose the jobs. We're going to transform the jobs. We're going to become better at our jobs, and part of it is creating the possibility, creating the industries that never existed before. Again, use an internet example. All these location-aware services became possible when we got our cell phone with GPS in it.
Mm,
Until that moment of time, that industry could not exist. So, it, in addition, versus a replacement, and that creates jobs.
mm. How are you using generative AI in Wesco?
We we have a multi-pronged approach to it. We have a very cautious rollout from a standpoint that we don't want hallucinations and all the other issues, as well as data privacy, securities, and things like that. So what we're trying to do is we're doing some pilots in various applications where we are already seeing really good results. We're also looking at personal productivity, and I think the key for us is to make sure that It's not a technology for the sake of technology. It's a technology for the sake of outcome. And to your
Mm.
point, it could be the savings. It could be new opportunity creations. It could be um, productivity improvement, whatever it is. But we want to define it. We want to measure it. And then we want to take the approach that doesn't compromise security and ethics and all the other factors that come with AI that, frankly, growing up at RPA space, how often do you think about ethical bots? How often do you think about data security when you put a bot out there? Probably not as often as you would with AI. So it requires some paradigm shifts and some changes. And again, the hype of the expectations creates an interesting environment where businesses come to us saying, hey, we want to do it.
Mm.
And we want to use this company. And we're like, well, who are they? What
Well,
is their
we
value?
had those ethics, and we had all those discussions also with RPA back then. I remember that I had to answer questions for workers' councils in Germany and everything, right? So
Right, but that's sort of that might be slightly different level of ethics where you're talking about job protections. You're not
yeah.
probably talking about RPA bot should be RPA bot be able to decide if somebody gets a visa to visit the country or not, right? With AI,
Mm.
that's a reality. It's the that type of a game that I think requires a slightly different framework, but fundamentally, it's all about this is the investment, this is the return. Does it make sense for the company, and does it
If it works,
justify
it
the risk
works. Yeah,
associated with it?
yeah, yeah. If it does the job, it does the job, right? But that also leads me to something I wanted to talk about too. About one of the key elements in the RPA hype we had some years back was the POC cemetery of projects that never made it beyond showcasing. Made it into scale. The notorious RPA that could never scale. You remember that as well. So,
Mhm.
so what caused this POC cemetery, and how do we avoid it with generative AI?
I, I love the term. I never never heard it before, and I love it. It is a POC cemetery, and it's when I started the program. It was around 2018 when I was doing all the research. I came across statistics that about 70% of the RPA initiatives fail. I don't
Mm.
think it has changed much. I had a chance to present at many conferences over the years, and the question about how do we not fail, how do we scale, how do you find the use cases, how do we build a framework, keep coming back, which tells me that that statistics is probably still accurate. I recently saw the statistics that about 70% of Gen AI pilots fail. So that cemetery, if you think about it, there are a couple of roads to it. One of them is probably just picking the wrong project, feeding of the hype, feeding of the excitement, and picking the project that's simply unimplementable and that leaves a bad taste for everybody and kills the problem. That probably one of the roads. The
So
other
what?
road might
So what is the wrong, in what do you call it, the wrong understanding of AI projects, and that you think is wrong?
it it could be anything from we are unable to implement it because technology is not there. It could be that when the project was picked, there was not enough due diligence done, so the steps were not clearly understood and the dependencies are not clearly understood. The expectations are not set correctly. The
Yeah, but an
return on the
example.
investment. I mean, it's all over the place, right?
Yeah, but what I'm looking for is an example of where you think people are looking for use cases the wrong places with Gen AI, because that's what you said led to the RPA projects failing, right? They thought to do things they shouldn't try to do with it. So where are we doing that with AI? Oh, this is interesting because that's cutting edge, right?
That's a great question, and I think we all see the publicity that this type of projects generate. Some of them are cutesy about a car dealership
Mm.
where the chatbot is able to sell the car for $1, and that's funny and cute and all that, and that's probably a pretty benign example where it's not a lot of harm can be done by this type of things other than reputational risks. There is a bigger one that I think is still in production by New York City. They have My City chatbot that provides legal advice to the business owners. And there are articles that show how that bot can provide a better or straight illegal advice. And this is different because with the chatbot on a car dealership, you're kind of playing around the bot. You're trying to test the boundaries. In those examples, you're asking very valid questions. You're saying, do I need to tell my workers about changes in shift schedule?
Mm.
Can I discriminate my tenants as a landlord based on the sources of income? And the bot gives the wrong answers, and that could have legal consequences for people who follow the bot. To me, that would be the examples of the projects that reach production that probably require a little bit of rethinking.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there is a ton of projects that never reach production just because folks couldn't implement what they did. And if you go to a conference, if I'm sure you've been to many conferences a year ago and listened to folks claiming about their POCs that are near in production, almost ready, and they would describe a use case, and you would listen to that, saying, "Hmm, interesting." And then you never hear about that project hitting production, and that's fairly common as well.
Yes, yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right with the legal thing, right? Maybe not having giving legal advice. That's having a law is not something you hallucinate, right? So, but I also think I don't think actually the car dealership chatbot is only a reputational thing because as you saw with the Canada case, that was not a Gen AI bot, but it no, they were told any system you have in your website, you're responsible for it. So
Mhm.
people need to realize that, and that's also why I think sometimes the marketing and customer service chatbots that we've put in with Gen AI is not necessarily the right place to start because your customers are the most important people for your company, right? And and we want to make sure that we have the right interaction with them.
Right. It's all about putting the right testing into place, putting the right validations into place, and frankly, understanding the technology
Mm,
before picking up the use case. Goes back to the RPA conversation. You want to make sure that you understand the technology and you're not trying to build something that is just impossible to build. And we're pretty good at doing that.
mm. Um, RPA was also primarily a way to maintain and orchestrate automation technologies, right? What are the contours of maintenance and orchestrations when it comes to generative AI?
It's a great question. I don't think we have good answers yet. The technology is just too new to have a lot of clarity around it. But I really think that the orchestration piece in particular is not necessarily about one technology in isolation. I think what we're going to see is a symbiotic relationship between everything that we had, where the orchestration is going to become even more critical from a standpoint that you might have AI generating some sort of a decision, but then you might use RPA to implement that decision. And you need
Mm,
to orchestrate it seamlessly, and you want to be able to orchestrate it in a way that there is a failure mechanism, there is a rollback mechanism, right? There is all kinds of things. And it could be that AI needs more data and RPA delivers more data. We're seeing the use cases where you start with data gathering activities that require a combination of all kinds of technologies. And then you have the analytics that requires a combination of all kinds of technologies. And then you have the actions that again require all kinds of technologies. We may be in a slightly unique place in a way that we're a distributor. Distributor is always squeezed between the customer and suppliers, and all of them have
mm,
their own systems and their own idiosyncrasies and level of technology that comes with those systems. But what we're seeing is that it's fairly common to say you need to gather the data from multitude of entities. You're going to use the multitude of technologies and orchestrate it to work seamlessly.
mm.
That I think is going to continue and enhance. And with IoT technology gaining speed, that's going to get even bigger.
Well, maybe also using the other technologies to sort of control the AI bots, right? Make sure they only do what they're
Mhm.
allowed to do.
Right, and that could be. I saw some interesting examples where the prompts go from a human to an RPA bot. An RPA bot feeds it to Gen AI, doing some cleansing and adding additional prompts to make sure that it doesn't overstep the boundary. I don't know if it's
Exactly.
going to be perpetually necessary, but for right
But
now, it may
but you
not be.
also said, it's about adequate testing. You said just before, right, to avoid some of the problems that we saw. But I think Yari Vadan on the podcast number 19 said that that's the difficulty. We can't do adequate evals on these models, right, because they're stochastic. You don't with code. You know what you're going to get out, but you don't really know that with
Mhm.
with generative AI models all the time. So how are you going to do that?
And that goes back to the use case selection, right? You don't you when selecting the use case, how are you going to test it? What is the cost of an error? How are you going to detect the error? All those things go into the use case selection up front. And I think that's where we're going to see more and more companies wisen up to say, no, it's not a silver bullet. This is the type of use cases. This is the human in the loop structure. These are the things that we want to make sure that we do correctly so they all work and make
Mhm.
sense.
So we're gonna see this being much more specific. You think much more specific use cases and having more humans in the loop all the time. That is your clear.
I don't know. I mean, it can all change in a year. It can all change in a few years. But right now, would I
See,
want
that's
to
the
use
influencer answer, right? That's the one saying, "Oh, I don't know. I don't dare to say no or yes, right?" But you have a hunch, right?
I all I can and again I try to flip the table a little bit and think of myself as a consumer more as a expert in the field. When do I want to interact with AI?
Mm.
And the answer may be not as glorious as you think. There are many cases where I would much rather talk to a very scripted environment where I know I can get to the answer faster, or to a human where I know I'm going to get the compassion and the conversation and be able to pick up on various cues and twist the conversation the way I see it. There is room for AI in this whole mix, but that AI might be hidden behind the RPA, behind the human. Or maybe I do want to talk to AI, but then again, AI needs to be able to address my needs very, very effectively.
So would you have put it in LinkedIn, right? This draft my post with AI. Would you have done that? Is that where you want it?
I,
Do you like to read AI generated posts, Maxim?
if it's clearly AI generated, or if it's clearly poorly written by a human, I don't think it makes a lot of difference. I really don't need to know how the sausage is made as long as it's a good sausage, right? So, to the extent, if you have an AI model that really does a great job of generating the posts, so be it. I will be more than happy to read them, right? So far,
So
it's
the
usually
Instagram
it's
influencers,
the
right?
AI model.
The AI influencers. That's just okay with you if they do a good job.
Hey, I'll eat it if it tastes good, right?
I always think, I like to know there's someone sending the message because it feels like that's where you have the agency, right? I think the agency belongs to us to some extent. So I'm always annoyed if we sort of, even though it sounds like, it looks like a sausage, it'll still, you know, McDonald's looks like beef, but
Yeah. Well, it takes one bite to tell the difference, right? And
yeah.
that's my point. I don't want to turn into the bot police and try to detect the AI in every post on
No.
LinkedIn, every article, every book, every student's homework, and so forth. It's more about, is the answer good? Is the answer coherent? Does it meet my needs expectations? Does it provide the value? If it does, I really don't see difference in the technology utilized to get the answer. And unfortunately, I think AI is still at a disadvantage there compared to humans in both the style and the substance.
So, but so with people just start using and people in your company start using generative AI to build things, right? Then that must be the dream for a citizen developer setup, isn't it? Uh, or or is this also, will you eat it?
It's back to that, right? It's what is the quality of that? And particularly on the development side, it's not just the moment you receive the code. It's also how easy it is to maintain, how easy to understand, how easy it is to deploy into production. Does it provide all the elements that you're looking for? All of a sudden, that AI powered developer doesn't sound as attractive as you think. Is there a place for it? Absolutely. I would love to see more efficiency, more productivity in any area, including IT, but it's overall total cost of ownership, which boils down to, just like I said, how easy it is to maintain this code. What's
Hmm.
the readability? Can
So
we really be sure that it's safe?
but yeah, but you built citizen developer setups, right? Maybe just explain what is a citizen developer, Maxim, because that's a discussion I always have, right? Citizen surgeons, stuff like that. What is a citizen
I want
developer?
that conversation. Let's see how much time do we have left.
but
Yeah,
you've but
the
you've built
citizen
them,
developer.
right?
Yeah, the citizen developer to me is a very simple concept. It's a business employee that is nothing to do with IT and wants to automate his her job to make their own life easier. And I try to really drive those business employees not to think about too far outside of what their span of responsibilities is. Focus on what you have, focus on what you own, make your life easier. And if you think that somebody else should make their life easier, well, Let's connect with that somebody else and see if we can find a citizen developer on that side. That's the benefit of the scale, but also the citizen developers. I think the important thing to remember about business employees, they're not programmers. And low code, no code doesn't change the fact that they're not programmers from a standpoint that programming is not just writing the code itself. Yes, there's a little bit of learning curve there, but it's more about how do you think about it?
Mm.
Do you know about the data? Do you understand the concept of testing? Do you understand the concept of production environment versus non-production environment? Do you understand how to build a legible code? And I think we all come from the background where somewhere in our career we would see an Excel macro or some sort of a script built by somebody who is not quite an IT person, and you inherit that thing and you look at it and that's a spaghetti of code. Nobody understands what it does, but it kind of delivers the result. So you need to maintain it and you have no clue what you're looking at. That's not citizen development. That's as bad of a citizen development as it comes. So it's all about, to me, citizen development is all about how do you harvest the energy of citizen developers to build something that is clearly usable, has clear return on the investment, and has a business continuity built into it so it doesn't become a liability to the team that has that citizen developer.
But then you're also reskilling them, aren't you?
Not necessarily. And I'm a little struggling with the concept of reskilling when it comes to technology from a standpoint that somebody picked a trajectory to become a certified public accountant, a lawyer, or anybody, not to be and not an IT trajectory. That's their life choice. That's an awesome choice. If somebody wants to reskill into IT type of personality, that's a very significant undertaking. A lot of people not interested in that.
No, but you're just
So
saying,
rather
make
than
sure they build things that works and doesn't compromise anything. Then they also need to, you said they had no contact with IT. Then they suddenly need to have a contact with IT, right?
right. So what we're doing with citizen developers is my organization is responsible for really two things when it comes to citizen development. One is harvesting, educating, making them ambassadors to the organization. And the way I think about it, my COE is pretty small, and we cannot be in every line of business. And we're not experts in every line of business. I'm not an expert in HR, legal,
Mm.
supply chain and operations, or sales. So I need somebody who knows that stuff, who can come in and really get that stuff find the ideas for us to implement. That's the first and foremost role of the citizen developer to be that ambassador, the advocate, the catalyst for the
So it's
change.
more like a citizen evangelist, a citizen business analyst.
Absolutely. Well, I wouldn't call it business analyst. We can help with it, even with that. But it's evangelist, it's believer, it's a person who understands what technology can do and identify the use cases. And then every now and then we see the citizen developers who are ex IT employees. Awesome at that. Sure, here's the license, go build something. A lot of times we see the people who cannot really build the steps file, and that's absolutely fine. We'll help them out. It's about the cultural change, it's about the business change, and that's another role of citizen developers is to be the change agent. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm from corporate, I'm here to automate your job, or I'm here because your boss told me that I need to automate your job. You're not going to get the same level of engagement and excitement compared to somebody coming, I want to do it.
But don't you think we're going to see more citizen developer crappy code? More of the bad RPA and BBA stuff you talked about, because now everyone can just ask ChatGPT and get it to produce code for anything. You also saw, GitHub said that there is a downward push in code quality after Gen AI because everyone's pushing a lot more, right?
Mhm.
So, what do you
And
say
that's,
about that? Are you
yeah, that's
experiencing that?
That's a great question, and our answer for the programs that we run at Wesco is that a citizen developer should not be able to easily push the code into production. Yeah,
Mm.
you can experiment, you can build it, but then we want a professional to take a quick look and help out, or maybe rewrite the code, or do whatever is appropriate. And part of it is, if you think about the business world, right, it all usually starts with let's interact with email, let's interact with SharePoint drives, let's interact with other things that have API connections, that have all kinds of things. Are we prepared to open it to everybody in the company? Probably not. What does it mean? That means that we're going to rewrite that code.
But I love this because everyone's saying that everyone's a developer now and it's a productivity tool, right? But what you're saying is that yeah, it is, but we're going to push it into bureaucracy anyway because we need to review it before we put it into production. So it doesn't really matter if anyone can make code because that's always what I say, right? It's not the code that's the thing; it's the orchestration, it's the implementation, it's that whatever you thought will have an effect on thousands of people, and think that what you thought is good enough to have an effect on thousands of people. It's all of that, right? It's all of the there's this focus on the individual becoming more productive, but we need to always look at. I think I thought about today while driving to work that people always say that there's so much waste in how we have a drag when we interact and bureaucracies and we have stakeholders, and that's always the drag, right? That's always so tedious and annoying, but at the same time that's also what makes everything we do real, right? Because that's where we touch with each other, we interact with each other, we have friction because we have different opinions, and then we so is that even possible to automate away? I think that's also what you're alluding to, or what I'm reading from what you're saying, that you can't really automate that away. It doesn't matter how productive your productivity tool gets, you'll still need to go around the tedium of getting things into production, which also involves stakeholders.
It certainly does, and for us, it was a very simple decision, right? Do you create the Wild West? And that's sort of probably more of a vision that Microsoft pushes with the Power Platform. Let everybody build something and deal with the consequences. I'm not a
Mm,
big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of that. So what we try to do is we try to say, okay, let's give every employee of the company a ability to submit automation idea,
yeah.
and let it simplify it to 10 questions. So if it takes you more than 10 minutes to submit your initial automation idea, something is wrong right there.
Mm,
Then let's have a discovery call. Let's figure out what they want to do. Let's help them, guide them, and that should be 30 minutes.
yeah.
And then if we say, yeah, we can do it, and part of that discovery effort is figuring out what do we need? What systems are you touching? Maybe you're touching the ERP and you need access to sensitive data. Okay, that changes a little bit the conversation, but I would never say no just because of that. But then the next step is okay, let's build this bot. Let's meet with the citizen developer or just an employee and figure out how they do the process, understand what in RPA world would be the steps file with GenAI and things like that. The steps file might look a little different, but fundamentally it's still let's understand what we are asked to build, let's understand how it works.
Audit
Let's create
trails, all that as well,
adequate
right?
documentation and then take it from there and put it into production. Total amount of time that we want citizen developers to waste on what we consider bureaucracy is probably about 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the level of complexity. If
Yeah,
you
but that's
don't
really
have,
nice. But it's still what I'm saying is, it's still managed, right? There's still a gate to get things into production. And my point is just the productivity tools. There's some things that are just critical in companies, right? Some I used to say that uh, if you don't want everyone to have flat file upload rights in your SAP, maybe not give them an RPA tool to just move all the data in a different through the interface, right? So there's sometimes we want to safeguard our data. There are these validation steps when you use a form. That's why not everyone can just do a flat file upload. Um, but I think people are always, and I feel I have to repeat myself. I've been saying this for years now, since I did RPA. That sometimes slow is a design. Sometimes we don't want everyone to just mess up our data.
right, and the simplest example of that, we all get a paycheck. Well, do you want a robot to generate your paycheck, and do you want the citizen developer to put things into production into a payroll system where all of a sudden you found a random tax applied to your paycheck because somebody forgot to check something?
Yeah,
Probably not. Well, that's the answer. And funny you mentioned the forms. A lot of times, this is the best way to put the error handling. You already have the forms, controls, and validations
yeah.
built for the humans using the UI. Okay, let's put the bots to use that same form and handle all the error handling. All of a sudden, you have a lot of safety and minimal technical implications of building that because all that complex logic, all the testing is already done by prior generations of programmers who built the tool itself versus opening it to some sort of a data loader. And again, I might be dating myself. I remember very well those position based data loaders, and sometimes those scripts would run away and start typing wrong things into the wrong fields and not realize it and not stopping. I would never allow for my bot to be built in a way that it can run away. And you would never allow Gen AI to do something like that either, right? So that's where the orchestration comes back into the picture of how do you take the energy of Gen AI and then orchestrate it into that rigidity of the ERP system.
So, this is what do you think then about all these autonomous agents that everyone's saying is going to come out and kill RPA? I think this you would never want that. You said just said right.
It could be the autonomous agent governed by RPA. Why not? It could be the autonomous agent.
Then it's not autonomous, right?
I mean, the concept of autonomous enterprise boils down to if the enterprise is truly autonomous, nobody is needed for it, right? It should not need any humans at all. Do we want it? Probably not. And it's more about what role is the autonomous agent taking? Is that what is its level of authority? And yes, there need to be checks and balances. It could be another agent, it could be a human. But I think the orchestration comments, we keep coming back to the orchestration, becomes more and more important from a standpoint that all this autonomous agent, humans, outside influences in forms of documents coming in or decisions being changed or governing regulations being updated, all of that needs to be orchestrated together and work in unison. And I don't know, and I don't think we know yet how easy it is it's going to be to tweak the autonomous agent whenever we decide to change the process, to change the fundamental assumptions. And that type of things happen much more often than we think.
But the people are, want the idea is that I'll get an autonomous agent. I can just give it access to my credit card and everything, and
Mhm.
Google already have all that info, and then say, okay, arrange a party for me and buy everything. Here's your budget is 10,000 or something like that, and then it does everything, right? And there's no limitations on that. So that's the aim right now. And do you think we'll? But you say we're gonna have still have a lot of constraints on that.
I think it comes to humans more than technology. Do you want the robot to do that? Do you want to give the robot your credit card and book stuff for you without looking, right? You say, I don't know how you book your travel. When I book my travel, yeah, I can take the first hit that AI suggested to me, or I can apply a lot of intangible knowledge that I have that I don't like connections in this airport. I like connection in this airport. I want to top of the frequent flyer miles on this airlines versus that airline, and the price is the same.
Mm,
This type of things, will the autonomous agents will ever be good enough to do it, or will consumers be willing enough to give up that control? Is to be determined.
mm. Yeah, but it's just the killing off uh, killing off RPA. A lot of people have been speaking about that at least, and I think that's just because then you can just say it to everything. But there's also this. I think there's a lot of this. This is sci-fi thing, right? This is people who dream of Jarvis and always getting right answers from Jarvis, but that's not what we have right here. I think we're overestimating technology like we used to do, right?
It's interesting how in the technology world we always talk about one technology killing the other, and it's usually not a back of the school type of fight environment where two technologies that duke it out. It's not how it works. It usually works in a symbiotic relationship where you look at and you look at the cost of updating the systems, and that's why we have so much cobble still out there, right? And you look at the cost of the need to update the system, and you look at the need to replace one technology with another, and you make a decision. And you, over time, we learn that this technology is perfect for this type of task, and this technology is perfect for a different task. So might as well use both of them.
Mm,
Let more of them be there. I don't think that we ever have a clear example where one technology killed the other technology in a short period of time.
mm. Except from Minidisc.
Well, the only example I can think of that portable GPS devices, those little boxes of Garmin, TomToms, Magellans, whoever made it, right?
Yeah,
Everybody had them, and 10 years later they were gone
yeah.
because all that same capabilities become available in a car, in a cell phone, and everywhere else. But even that was a prolonged system, and guess what? In the trucking industries, they still prefer those dedicated things for the size of the screens, for things that are relevant for the truckers and so forth. So even in those type of cases where it's kind of clear cut, usually it's not necessarily the technology died; it just moved to where it belongs.
Mm. So, so how are you actually approaching, the strategic levels of AI in Wesco? I usually say you don't need a tech strategy if you're not a tech company, right? You need a challenger strategy. You need to look about what are your problems, what do you want to solve, right? Um, do we need AI strategies, and do you have an AI strategy in Wesco?
Um, I think this strategy is a pretty big word. Let me try to decompose it into smaller elements, right?
Oh,
You
but
have
that's on purpose, right? Because that's what the big consultancy firms are selling AI strategies.
Mhm.
That's why it has to be the big thing.
Right, and it's usually a slide with multiple pillars, and each one of those pillars could probably be better off looking at individually before connected back together from a standpoint that you have your use cases, you have that process of evangelizing and finding the right use cases, and that's part of the strategy. You have the strategy for figuring out the return on the investment, which I think is often neglected in the AI cases, and it shouldn't be. I don't think finding the ROI needs to change whether it has AI components or not. It's all about we're going to invest X. Here's the desired outcome that we want to have, and we should have ourselves accountable to delivering that outcome.
But what you're mentioning there is more like tactics or policies. We want to be efficient, find the right use case. That's not, strategy is about we need to fix this because this is a big, corporate problem we are having, and we need to. So having an AI strategy means that we will become an AI company, right? As far as I understand it, right?
I, I mean, you can call it what you want, but I think the big journey starts from the small steps. We have a problem. Is the AI the right tool to solve it? You got to have
Mm.
the framework to figure out the next step of the evolution, whether it's a program or a progress or whatever it is.
Yeah,
What is the right?
you're practical, you're a pragmatist, Maxim. So you're all about, how can I use it right now, right? Does it make sense in what I'm doing? Then I'll use it, right?
I am very pragmatic about it, and I think that in the corporate world, that's probably safer than idealistic approach.
Mm.
Do we want to invest money into experimentations? Absolutely. Do we want to have the pilots and some things where you don't expect the ROI, you just want to get your feet wet and learn how to use it? Absolutely, but it should be treated as such, and it should come out of discretionary budgets as opposite to operating budget that we need to define something in order to fund this AI initiative. If you're doing that, well, what is the return on the investment from
But let me
what we
just let me,
define
let me ask you
compared to what we're
differently
doing?
then instead of strategy. Let me say, do we need AI frameworks, or do you just build them into the current frameworks? Do you have an AI framework, or do you just use your RPA frameworks?
We have a framework for AI and RPA, and they're slightly different. And where the differences come in primarily is security, right? Data safety, security, all governance, ethics, all the things that have tremendously more impact on the AI field.
Mm.
It's also AI is much more data hungry. So part of the AI framework could also be more focused on do we have the data? What's our strategy for making sure that we have everything to make AI successful? Typically, on the RPA side of things, if a human can do it today and can show me how it's done, I know I can do it with a bot, unless there are a lot of judgment calls. And that's where the strategies might be slightly different and a lot more detailed and a lot more nuanced for AI. But fundamentally, I think the elements of why are we doing this project? How are we going to do this project? What is our budget? Do we have the funding to do the project?
Do
What's
you
the
have different
expected
people
outcome?
maintaining it,
Mhm.
or do you
Right.
have
And,
different
and
people maintaining your AI than your or RPAs, or it's the same person?
in our organization, it's a team of people working on the AI side and a team of people working on RPA. They may roll into different lines of business and
Mm.
different heads, and that's absolutely fine. It's still a collaborative environment. We are really working very, very closely with very across the teams to make sure that we are driving the same thing.
Mm.
And we purposely put in the same framework on traditional IT, non-traditional IT, citizen development, AI, everything else, so we understand what's happening with the company and we don't have a business continuity risk. I'm very big on the business continuity risk coming from again supply chain and
Mm.
knowing what happens when the business continuity is not thought through. And part of it is just having the business continuity in terms of I know what my processes do. Part of it I know how to maintain those processes if somebody leaves. Part of it I have the smart way of orchestrating those elements so we don't build 25 versions of the same thing, wasting time and resources and adding the variability where it is not needed.
I think what you said before, that there's a slight difference only. They're very alike, those frameworks. And I, I just think there's so many people toting game changer, game changer, game changer, and you're just saying, oh, okay, it's kind of the same game, but it's just a little different. Is this
It,
American football and European soccer, or is it even more similar? Right? Is it like? American football and rugby. What are we talking about?
Well, it is different, right? I don't want to minimize the fact that the technology is different, the approach to the technology is different, the potential is different. But then
Mm,
again, to my knowledge, accounting hasn't changed. The business models haven't changed. What companies do haven't changed. If you are a corner grocery store, again, how you get the product on the shelf, it might be with help of AI or not. That doesn't matter. What I care about, it's there when I need it, and it's priced the right way, and it's
but
tasty.
but I'm just, it's just like, if you look at it from an animal perspective, right? So you have a cow and you have a horse, right? But or let's imagine two different animals, but
Mhm.
we're sort of saying that we treat them almost the same way, right? So does it really matter if they're different? Yeah, obviously different when we look at them, but we treat them almost the same way, and that's what I thought was interesting about what you said. Slightly different frameworks, you said.
It's and I'm trying to take that forward, a metaphor for two animals, and it is, in farming, if you have the land, you should be able to grow both, right? But you
Mm,
take slightly different approach. You don't expect horses to produce milk.
no.
You don't expect cows to be utilized for races. And this is where, how do you make sure that your farm is ready for the horses if you've been growing cows all your life? Or the
Mm.
vice versa, right? Yes, it's the same pastures. Yes, it's probably the same buildings,
Yeah, let's
but the
expect we should
meaning of
clean
that
up
is
their,
different.
let's expect we should clean up their, what do you call that? We should clean up the shit. We should and give them some grass, and let's give them
Yeah,
a what do you a pasture. Oh, I knew that word. Let's get
yeah,
so
yeah.
let's assume some of those things, right? And then see how they act up different. That's how we'd go, right?
That's very much true, right? You want to make sure that you set up the boundaries. And by the way, the length of the fences around the farm probably different for horses and cows. I'm by no means the expert in that, but I would expect the horse to be able to jump over the fence that the cow will not try to jump over, right? So it
Now I just
is
have
different.
multiple pictures in my head of people trying to ride a cow on a race ride. Oh, it doesn't work like that. That's not what this one does.
But isn't that what we do with technology all the time? We
Yeah.
take our favorite technology and we try to turn it into riding a cows or milking horses or doing
Yeah.
all kinds of stupidities.
But that's also, some of the things that I think is interesting with Gen AI is that everyone's coming from a world where, um, and Yari Vadan said something like that as well, right? That Google expected people to want precise systems, and suddenly they're okay with something that generates something that we should review, right? And that took them by surprise. And also the whole idea of everything being so transactional. Usually, that's the world we come from in IT, transactions, right? All the time, and suddenly you have something that's more brainstorming technology. You can brainstorm with it, right? You can ask questions back and have a discussion, right? It's completely different. But we
It,
try to look at it like maybe this is a cow. Maybe this, could it work as a cow, right?
right, but I think not to be forgotten that in a company's world, it's still transactional. The only reason we are able to find time to have a conversation is because the invoices, the transactions get flowing, the material get received, the invoices get paid, right?
Mm.
So the transactional need to be taken care of, and can AI help with that? Absolutely. Should it help with that? Absolutely. And then, yeah, we can have the conversations about additional value and better and smarter ways of approaching the customer, and new services can be offered. All that is lovely, but it's on the foundation of transactional systems working flawlessly, or as you just said, cleaning up the pastures so you can walk through it without stepping into
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. So we've invented a crazy lying poetic machine, right? And then we're trying to see how can I use you for my invoice data. That's lovely.
Right, and here's the thing, right? We have the amazing technology that can write very complex sentences, and it can create beautiful emails on your behalf. But then you
Mm,
receive that email on the recipient side. You receive that email. That's crap. That's 2 pages instead of 3 bullets. I want my 3 bullets back. I want to be nimble. I want to be able to reply to that quickly. So
yeah,
what do? I put AI that summarizes AI
yeah,
generated email back
yeah.
into those 3 bullets.
Yeah, make shorter content instead of making longer content. We don't need more content, as Nosobina also said in episode 6, I think. We need no 7. We need more relevant. content. And I think that's exactly the point here, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
and quantity is not quality from a standpoint that I'm scared about the amount of Gen AI generated data that becomes the sources for Gen AI generated data. It's a perpetual circle that creates
yeah,
more and more data. That really rigidates the same thing. There's nothing new in it. And if there is something new in it, it's kind of get drowned by the amount of
yeah.
data it generated.
Do you know, Maxim? This is a lovely note to sort of wrap this up on. I think this has been a really great conversation. I have one final question for you that I always ask every participant in the podcast, and I hope you're ready for it.
Yes, I am.
So, Maxim, what is the only constant?
That's the question that I have the longest time to prepare. Pretty much from your first episode, I knew that question would be coming. And I still don't know if I have a good answer, but I'll try. I think the only constant is really our humanity desire to get better. In Lean, we call it continuous improvement. Other ways we can term it progress. And I'll give you an example that has nothing to do with technology for a change. And it's a compliment of my 14-year-old son who came from a swim practice and said, you know what? Everybody on our team swam faster than 100-year-old Olympic record. And it took me a second to digest that. And then it took me a second to understand that he's in a high school team, which is not the most athletic team by any means. But he's right. I did a quick Google search, and a lot of us can swim faster than a 100-year-old Olympic record. And you start thinking about swimming, it's not the sport that is very heavy on the equipment. Yeah, you have the swimming goggles, you have the cup, you have the swimwear, but that's minimal. And the changes there definitely made a difference, but that cannot account alone for all the changes. So, what else is happening there? Well, what's happening is we have the advancement in science and ability to build the machinery that allows us to understand what's the most efficient stroke. So the strokes have evolved to become faster swimmers, and we keep getting better. And if you look at the transitions of the record over the years, it's not like there's a major jump. It's always like slow, incremental, couple of seconds here, couple of seconds there, but it keeps happening. And yes, it is that. Yes, it is efficiency of the stroke. Yes, it is the fact that we have swimming pools availability, right? We built the civilization that has that. We have civilization that has enough nutrients that people got bigger and stronger in general. So that better that it can be indicated from that swimming example really touches so many different things, and that's just what our humanity is all about. We never settle for the status quo. We keep pushing forward. We keep moving, and we are continuously making things better. And I truly believe that's our only constant.
That's a really great answer. That we incrementally, in multiple different dimensions, always make things better.
That's that's what I hope. At least that's what I hope is happening.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Maxim, and thank
Yeah.
you so much for being on The Only Constant. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure, and hopefully that's a great conversation. Really appreciate being here.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.